Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Julia Talbot. I am here from the Department of Family and Support Services, and I welcome you to your Friday afternoon webinar on the Youth Intervention Pathways RFP. This RFP was released on December 1st, and it is due on January 6th at 12 noon. We will be harping on that date quite a bit. I am joined, let's see if I can get the next slide to go. What's that? Oh, there we go. A little bit of housekeeping. Everybody has been placed on mute due to the volume of participants. If you have questions or you're having a technical problem, please put your questions and your technical problems into the question box, and we will work on resolving your technical issues. We will be breaking for questions usually twice, once after we go through the RFP, sort of the scope, but before we do the administrative aspects of how do you actually make an application. And again, at the end, in case you have extra questions after you've thought for a while. Just so you know, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted on the DFSS YouTube channel with a link to the recording and a PDF of these PowerPoint slides will be posted to the DFSS website under this particular funding opportunity, which is found in the funding opportunity or the alerts sections on the DSS website. So just so you know, you are being recorded, but that you will be able to get this. Sometimes it takes a few days for us to get that webinar posted, but it's almost always available at the DFSS YouTube channel way before it makes it to our website. So if you do a Google search of DFSS YouTube, you will in fact be able to get in early if you want to relive this awesome moment that we're going to share together. So today, here's our agenda. I am joined by Lisa Hampton, who's the Director of Prevention Intervention for our Youth Division, Jacqueline Pickens, who is the Project Manager, and Alexandria Corriveau, who is our Youth Service Coordinator. She's going to be manning the question box. And with that, no further ado, let me have you, our illustrious and well-versed youth service program staff, take it away. And I will just sit here and click slides. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to hearing your questions and telling you about this great opportunity. Lisa or Jackie?
Thank you, Julia, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. As Julia said, my name is Lisa Hampton. I'm the Director of Prevention and Intervention here at Youth Services for the Department of Family and Support Services. And we are very delighted to have you on this webinar today. For those of you who do not know or don't have a sense about what DFSS is, we are not Children's Services. We are not the state. The Department of Family and Support Services is actually 7 different divisions and departments that come together to provide primary social services for the city of Chicago. And we have roughly a network of over 360 community-based providers, ranging in services from anything from senior services all the way to children's services, which includes Head Start as well. Our mission is working with community partners. We connect Chicago residents and families to resources that build stability, support their well-being, and empower them to thrive. Our agenda for today is we're going to walk through the slide deck here. We're going to basically review the RFP exactly how it's laid out in the RFP. So if you have a copy of your RFP, it's really great. You'll be able to take notes as well, but we'll also, when I can, reference the section that we are referring to for within the actual RFP itself. So this webinar, the purpose of this webinar, just to remind folks, is this is for what is our youth interventions pathway. And that is DFSS's youth programming that is tied with a partnership with the Chicago Police Department. The purpose of this RFP is we are seeking agencies to coordinate services for youth 10 to 17 years old that have interactions with the Chicago Police Department, who need support services to decrease their ongoing interaction with police and decrease their risk factors, increase public safety, and develop accountability for young people that impact their trajectory towards future legal system involvement as well. Next slide. So for the Youth Services Division, this RFP is part of a broader effort in Chicago to reduce contact between youth and the legal system. And one of the things that I just want to point out is many of you might be familiar with some of our previous programming related to, in partnership with the Chicago Police Department. This is tied to a whole host of things, which we'll get a little bit into in the background portion, which is also listed in your RFP. So I strongly encourage everyone to actually read the RFP all the way through. If you download the RFP from my supplier, the application questions come first, and then the RFP is in the back. I strongly advise that you not start to answer the questions until you read the actual RFP and use the RFP as your guide in this process. Our goals for the Youth Service Division for this RFP is really to support really young people within the city of Chicago, as always. But research shows that supportive community services serve as a good alternative to arrest and incarceration. And we're also really trying to see and implement programming that impacts young people, decreases their social and emotional harm. We really want to see a decrease in just the over surveillance and or contact of Black and brown youth within the city of Chicago. We're really working towards reducing the overrepresentation of youth of color in the justice system and to promote a safe, well-being, and prosperity of all youth in the city of Chicago. So as I mentioned, some of the background information, once again, all of this information is in your RFP, so I will just do a few highlights here. The Department of Family and Support Services, in partnership with the Chicago Police Department for over 16 years, has operated or in partnership been a case management provider at the GISC, which is the Juvenile Intervention Support Center. And in February 2020, the Inspector General completed an audit of the GISC, and within those objectives, some of the things that were elevated in regards to best practice, law enforcement's interaction with young adults, and basically the lack of diversion opportunities for young people. In addition to, next slide. In addition to that, some of those things are listed here that were found in this report. I want to stress to people that the Youth Intervention Pathways Program, a lot of it is focused on the GISC and how the GISC currently operated, but this particular RFP is really about young people's overall interaction with law enforcement in general. So there's a lot of reference to the GISC and how in the RFP, but this is also tied to the consent decree that the city is currently under as well. And so these are some of the findings. I think the two findings that I'll just bring to attention, because if you are going to end up receiving an award here, is something that we really want to stress, is this idea around collaboration and partnership. And that a key successful delegate here is going to be someone who is going to be willing to work with the Chicago Police Department, understand its culture, and being able to partner on ways that ultimately lead to them feeling comfortable deflecting or referring a young person to the delegate in lieu of an arrest. That is the goal here. One of the other things that I just want to elevate is this idea about sharing best practices, making sure that we are following best practices as it relates to being trauma informed, that we're not participating in net widening. And for those who are not familiar with that, is that we're not creating a system where we're actually trying to pool or arrest more young people in the system. The whole idea is to be about trying to decrease the number of young people who that lead to arrest. And we want to make sure that there's positive outcomes for young people through their programming, and that we want to be able to see delegates who can demonstrate that. Next slide. Some of the current or primary focuses for us in this RFP is that it is youth-centered. This is an engagement that is dependent upon youth and their families being willing to engage in services. It is not mandated, it is not required, and the idea is that we want young people to come and see this as a resource, and their families as well. The other piece of this is that respondents to this RFP need to be able to very clearly articulate family-centered responses and how they're going to engage with families. Because of the age, 10 to 17, we know that all of these services are dependent upon a consent from a legal guardian or whoever a young person deems as family. And we want to ensure that delegate agencies understand that a large portion of what they might be doing is going to be family-centered. Wraparound services and case management. This is just not making referrals and hoping for the best for young people. This is really interactive, and it's about engaging with young people, providing them with supports, services, and connections, but also making sure that those engagements are sustainable. That it's trauma-informed, that is per the consent decree, but also just in general, that is the principle of the Youth Service Division here, that all of our programming needs to be trauma-informed in how you work with young people and also their families, and also culturally competent. And that includes making sure that you are allowing and providing safe spaces for young people based on gender. So really thinking about how gender-based violence and other issues play out here, as well as sexual orientation for young people. So we want to ensure that places are making space and creating safe spaces for LGBTQ youth, as well as young women who oftentimes, when we talk about interactions with police or violence, are oftentimes not necessarily addressed. So I just want to elevate those two things here. And ultimately, that this is a data-driven continuous improvement. This is a program where we expect to work very closely with the delegate agencies. We will be looking at data all the time. We will be talking about improvements along with the Chicago Police Department. So this is really a partnership, and I want to stress that this is a partnership with us, DFSS, but also with the Chicago Police Department in order for this to be successful. This is just a quick timeline of the history of how we got here. As I stated, this goes way back to January 2019, and even before that, that's the day that the actual consent decree was signed. But the consent decree discussion started in 2018. And then these are some of the major milestones along the process that have led us to this point today. This has been a very ongoing process that has involved multiple departments in the city. The mayor's office has been heavily involved, Chicago Police Department, and then we had a very active advocate community being able to provide feedback and support about what they thought might be good potential programming for this. So this has really been a combined City of Chicago effort to ensure that we're providing the best possible services for young people. Next, I'm going to get into the program description for this. If you are in the RFP, the program description page starts in the section, right? It starts on my copy, it starts on page 10, but it really starts getting into, page 11 under section C called program requirements. So I just want to make sure we are all in the same space. Can you go back one slide, Julia? Sorry. Oh, maybe there's a slide missing. Maybe they're out of order. Okay. Keep going. Oh no, go forward. One more. There we go. So the service areas that we are looking at is this. Respondents are being asked to respond to a corresponding police area where they can provide hyper-local support services. I cannot stress that enough. We are looking for people who are already embedded in these areas, who have connections, who have a robust referral system in place, and have good follow-up mechanisms to show that they're a success. The Chicago Police Department is divided into 5 what they call areas. And then they also have 22 police districts. This map is how we've determined services will be divided in order to ensure we have multiple providers across the city. But once again, that we're also ensuring that young people and their families do not have to travel outside of a certain service area in order to be able to get the supports they need. So I want to be really clear, as people are looking through here and trying to make a decision, you have to pick and determine the police area that you're going to cover. This map is the same map that is in the RFP, and it breaks down the districts that you will be engaged with. So you are applying for a police area, and then as a respondent, you will be responsible for providing services for the police districts that are listed in that area. The difference between this and former programs for us is this is a citywide program that in partnership with the Chicago Police Department. And so we want to ensure that we have coverage across the city, and they're tied directly to those police districts that are listed by area here. Okay, program requirements. We want to just once again run through briefly all of the program requirements that are here. Once again, this is literally pulled directly from the RFP. So I want to be clear that we haven't added anything different here. In the RFP, they are listed out starting on page 12. And then we also have a graph that literally breaks it out in a chart on page 13 of the RFP. The target population. All referrals are going to come from the Chicago Police Department. We are not asking you to go out and recruit young people. We're not asking you to blend young people from current programming you have. All referrals will be coming directly from Chicago Police Department. The target population that we are looking at is what is under the Chicago Police Department's new rule, which is part of their consent decree, which is around the idea of deflection. Chicago Police Department has always done deflection, but in having a stated policy, in particular for the consent decree, that is very focused on this reduction in young people being arrested is critical. So we are looking at 3 types of young people that may be coming to you from the police department. Youth who are have an in-field interaction with police. So that is a young person maybe who gets stopped, maybe for curfew, maybe for something else. Maybe the police department already has a relationship with that young person or their family, and maybe thinks that they could benefit from some services. Once again, don't have to necessarily be arrested, but they are going to say, we really think that you maybe want to get connected to a provider. That's our first version, and that is going to be any police officer who's in the field who has an interaction with a young person. Second is going to be youth who are referred in lieu of arrest. So this is oftentimes, this is more of an informal process that currently is practiced sometimes across the city. This policy that the Chicago Police Department has put out makes this a more formal process with some more formal engagements as it relates to how those young persons get referred to the DFSS delegate. And the third is going to be youth who are formally or informally station adjusted. That is our current version of the diversion for the city, and oftentimes what connects young people to services is they must be arrested. So all 3 of these sort of interactions with police and law enforcement are going to be eligible for these services here. Service location and hours. As I stated before, this sort of gives a breakdown of the police areas. As you saw from before, some of the areas we've had to break out in multiple ways. So once again, I can't stress, you really have to look at the map to ensure that you understand clearly what area you're providing for and the number of young people that will be in that area. And in some areas, we have to break up that number in a very different way. So I just want to make sure people really spend some time looking at the map in order to do that. Agencies will provide services at their primary location and be flexible to engage with youth in a variety of other locations across the police area. So I want to stress 2 things here. One, we are not asking you to have services at a police station. What we are asking is that as you get referrals from the police station, within your area that you have flexibility about where to meet that young person and their needs with that, with their family. You may have a relationship or build a relationship with a police department over time that allows you to engage with them in that space, but we, for this grant, are not requiring anyone to be located in a police station. I want to be clear. We do expect that people are going to be able to be flexible in how they engage with youth and their families within their community areas. And we want you to, once again, take into account safety, those sorts of things. Based on the CPD current arrest data, what we know is the majority of the referrals will occur between 11 a.m. and probably 9 p.m. So we are asking for people to, as you put together your proposals, you need to be able to speak to what the research is showing us, what your operational hours will be in days, thinking about also weekends and warm handoffs as it relates to service connection with other providers. Staff to youth ratio is 1:30. This is short-term case management with young adults who, because of the target population listed above, are going to be low risk, low needs, or low risk. This is not a high risk program. This is not for youth who are at the highest risk of violence per se, according to DFSS. And so we want to be mindful that the caseload is going to be a little bit larger. So it is 1:30, and we anticipate people would be budgeting anywhere between 2 and 3 staff people. Next. Initial referrals and follow-up. And once again, the referrals will come directly from CPD. Providers will make initial contact within 48 hours. That is a data point for us. And a designated email address will need to be created for CPD submissions. Once again, for delegate agencies or respondents who are chosen as for this RFP, we will provide more structured detail with CPD about how these interactions will happen under a standard operating procedure manual. But for this, for the basis of this call today, we want to just be clear about how we anticipate and what the requirements are. And that is that providers will make that initial contact within 48 hours. Needs assessment and planning. We are going to be utilizing the YASI, which is the Youth Assessment and Screening Instrument. And that will need to be administered within 7 days of the referral and initial contact made with youth. And we're really using the YASI as a way to work with young people in a youth-driven way around planning. So they will complete the YASI, and then this is really about building a relationship with the young person and their families, and having the young person pick, once they've identified what's on the YASI, really working with them to develop what their case plan is going to be. And then based on their risk level, services will be determined anywhere between 30 and 90 days. Speaking to our trauma-informed and culturally competent case service coordination, once again, we're looking for awarded agencies, to provide internal as well as external services and referrals. Some of you may be able to provide the services yourself. Others may need to make referrals externally. All service connections will be documented, and all service connections should be planned with a sense of safety for the young person and their family to ensure attachment. Delegate communication, once again, that referrals will be responded to within 48 hours. There will be follow-up to CPD staff on the status. That was only related to youth who are station adjusted. And then there will be as we term to maintaining weekly contact with the young person. We do not expect people to visit people weekly. We expect there to be some kind of contact depending on the case plan as well as the risk level. That could be as simple as texting a phone call, visiting a young person at school. It could be having to see that person weekly in their home, or just maintaining phone contact. Once again, we are hoping people are going to be able to demonstrate their understanding of the needs assessment, case planning, and how it relates to communication with the young person and their family. And lastly, one of the biggest components we want to stress in this RFP is the utilization of restorative justice practices and services, that people have to be able to demonstrate that they're, how that's going to look, how that's going to be programmed, with a real focus on young people on healing and accountability. Target population, once again, 10 to 17 who meet the referral criteria of CPD, which is also listed on the slide again, which is youth who are in the field, have interaction with police, youth who are referred in lieu of arrest, or youth who are formally or informally station adjusted, which is, once again, that is an arrest according to CPD and the state law. Performance measures and outcomes. This is huge, and I can't stress enough that we are within the department. For those of you who've had some contracts with us over the last couple of years, we have really moved to a data-driven system, and performance outcomes has really become, it's a partnership. It's not a way for us to necessarily, it's not just about compliance, but it's about how do we help ensure that we're having the best impact on youth and their families throughout the city of Chicago. So I really want to stress the performance measure outcomes, and for people to review that section really clearly as you answer questions about the performance outcomes. This is, performance measures are in the RFP, in my version on page 18 under section D, performance outcomes. Our primary outcome of importance is the reduction in arrest. That is per the consent decree. We know that that is not necessarily something you necessarily can control, and that because this is, once again, a partnership with Chicago Police Department, part of what we hope to come out of this by picking the right delegates is by forging a relationship with Chicago Police Departments on the ground and being able to demonstrate your ability to meet the needs and the families, that they will be more confident in being able to refer young people to you in lieu of arrest. The outcomes from this program are 75% of youth will demonstrate increase in social and emotional skills. 85% of youth will engage in and sustain education supports. That's if that is identified in their assessment as a target goal. Youth will, 85% will engage in the sustained employment or employment supports. Once again, that is based on if they identify that in the IASI and identify it as a goal. Because of the age group, we know it's 10 to 17. Employment may not be the highest thing on their list, but we want to make sure that there's space for that and we capture people's good work if that is something that a young person identifies. 75% of youth will be able to identify a positive adult or a positive adult in their life. It says mentor, but I want to stay away from the word mentor. It's really a positive adult relationship in their life. 75% of youth will report feeling more knowledgeable about and confident about accessing services and resources available in the community. We hear this time and time again, since at least I've been here at DFSS, is one of the best indicators that a program is working as when a young person feels confident going to the individuals working that program and being, even before being asked to, saying, these are the things I need, or I need help in connecting to. So we want a young person and a family to feel like they have a better understanding of what is available within their local communities and how to access those services. And 75% of youth will report feeling more optimistic about their future. Some of these things will be captured in CitySpan. The other way that we're going to be capturing these things will be through surveys that DFSS will design and administer to young people and their families. In addition to that, we will be we want to ensure that people have a good sense about what the outputs are, and that 75% of the referred youth are contacted in 48 hours. As I said, this is the data point for us. This will also be a point that we will be checking in with awarded delegates regularly. 80% of enrolled youth will have a completed needs assessment. 80% of enrolled youth will develop a youth-driven service plan with their service coordinator. 70% of enrolled youth will successfully complete service plans, and that includes case management is closed out, post-assessments completed, and a transition plan is made within 90 days. So those are the three components for us that make a successful completed service. And then 75% of enrolled youth will be connected to additional support services beyond their last youth intervention pathways engagement, and their transition plan should reflect that. I want to get into selection criteria for this. Hold on, sorry. I want to make sure that we're in the selection criteria portion. And from the selection criteria, the first part is we have 5 components of the selection criteria. This is the area, there's a series of application questions you complete. This is the area that we look at. This is what we score. This is what determines whom we're going to be funding for this effort. There are 5 parts to the selection criteria. They're each weighted differently, and that is also listed in your RFP. The first part is community involvement. This is a new part that we added actually to our RFPs as of, I think, earlier this year. And part of it is the department as well as the city is very committed to equity. And this is for us to get a sense of equity as it relates to your board, your staff, and your understanding of the community area you've chosen. And so one of the things, I'm not going to read all of them. Once again, I strongly encourage you to read the RFP. This starts in page 23 under the section called evaluation process. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things here. One of the biggest areas is that you're able to demonstrate client and community engagement activities that inform service delivery. That you have expertise working with the Chicago Police Department in some fashion. That the respondent demonstrates a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and access and pay equity. This includes your staff as well as and also the diversity that we're asking people to talk about in this section is in relation to your staff as well as your board. Next slide. Output. What's our next one? Organizational capacity is our next one. There's only the things I would stress here is how is the qualified staff, their oversight of the program, the management structure, and how you're going to be able to hire staff and the time frame. We have a very quick anticipated timeline. We have we want to be able to go citywide fairly quickly. We're working with the Chicago Police Department around training and those sorts of things. So we want to ensure that we can hit the ground running. And so we really want people to be able to show how are you hiring and bringing folks in, and that they also have a very good understanding and are qualified to be able to provide these kind of services for young people, the case management connection, have a good understanding of relationship. That there's adequate systems and supports in place to monitor program expenditures. Anyone who's currently provided with us understands program expenditures to us are often an indication of whether or not you're executing your programming efficiently. It's not always a good indicator, but unfortunately for us, it is something we look at a lot. So making sure that you have the infrastructure to do expenditures, to do vouchering, that you voucher monthly, that you're able to respond to quick responses from the comptroller's office or our finance team. So what does that structure look like, and that you have the ability to be able to execute those functions. And lastly, that the respondent has experience in utilizing a valid youth needs assessment. Once again, we've already chosen the tool. It's the YASI, but we want to make sure that people have some understanding about using a valid assessment tool in order to work with young people around service planning. Next is strength of proposal. And this is really where we're asking you to tell us why you are the best person to get to be funded for this effort. And so there's a lot of focus on informal and formal partnerships you might have, how you're going to be addressing the outcomes for the target population, what a partnership with CPD would look like for you, and how that would, how you're going to coordinate services in a client-centered way and in a comprehensive way. We're also asking people to think about what is going to be your approach to the 48-hour requirements in response to referrals, and to be able to describe an effective approach for retaining program participants. We all know one of the hardest things in this kind of engagement is that, so we want to see that. The next criteria for us is program performance, outcome, and quality. Once again, we want to be able that you can demonstrate strong past performance in very similar outcomes and goals and metrics for this particular population, and how you have used data to improve or inform services in the past, because that is going to be a very key part of the success of this program. And lastly, reasonable cost, budget justification, and leverage of funds. That you have the fiscal capacity to implement this proposed program, that you have resources and other funds attached to support or be able to ensure that you can hire staff and do those things while you wait for vouchering or reimbursement from the city, and that you demonstrate reasonable implementation cost and funding requests related to finances and human resources. So there is a budget that is embedded or attached to the RFP. For those of you who currently are a provider for us, please do not use any other form other than the one that is provided in this RFP to put your proposed budget together. And then within the RFP, we've been very clear about what the award amounts are actually going to be. And so really it's all the other things we want to see about reasonable costs on your budget sheet. And then this is just a list of all the attachments that are going to be required. I do want to highlight for people on this call that part of your strength of proposal section is you must complete the vignette activity. There is a vignette activity attached to that section. Do not respond in the application, but you must attach as the vignette to and upload it as an attachment in that supplier. I want to stress that. That's part that we need you to respond to the vignette question, not within the application question itself, where you write it out. It needs to be an attachment. So what is our budget proposal? We're looking at a term starting March 1, running through December 31st, 2024. The amount of this RFP for 1 year is $250,000. We have our general, which standard sort of DFSS contractual pieces, the admin cap. It's really helpful for us if you have other matches, if there are other funding sources you have that that you're going to leverage. It's really helpful for us to see those things on your budget. And then we want you to submit a budget for as a 1 year programming. So if you for your as part of your proposal package here. The cost category definitions are attached. Once again, just as I've stated, read the RFP, read the RFP, read the RFP. Please read the budget instructions. If you are not the person who's going to do this, I strongly suggest, I know for a lot of agencies, multiple people work on an RFP and there are different people working on things. Please ensure that the person who completes the budget has a clear understanding about the RFP and that it makes sense as you put your application together. And then the other thing I just want to say is making sure that they're reasonable costs once again. We also just want to highlight common mistakes we see. The budget form that we have does some of the calculation for you. So once again, whoever is doing the budget, make sure they understand that. There are formulas that are embedded oftentimes, and just common mistakes that we see along the way. This impacts your score because part of it is we need to understand your budget as it relates to the proposal that you've submitted. So we've just highlighted some of the common mistakes that we see on the budgets here. Fringe, oftentimes people either don't do the calculation or somehow it's they don't add it in. Supplies, these are usually mostly over budgeted or under budgeted. So we just want to make sure people understand that. Support services, clearly this is about ensuring that young people move and their families move towards success. And so being able to think adequately about what is that going to cost in order for us to do some support services here. You must attach the job descriptions for this, and just want to make sure that whatever your job description title is on your attachment needs to be on your budget, and it should be listed the same way as a title. There's a manager position that we've talked about in this RFP. as well as service coordinators. And so the titles should be, if you have listing staff on your budget, you should be very clear about what the staff titles are that are on your budget. So don't just say staff. We need to know what staff you're referring to. If you're adding data entry, admin, whatever, we need to have that title and a corresponding job description that's uploaded. Put your budget in the appropriate column. I can't stress enough, please read the instructions. There is a column for the program cost, what you're asking the city for, what is going to be your contribution, and then a total program cost. Oftentimes people mistake those columns. So just be really mindful as you're putting the budget together that we are looking at what are you asking the city for a cost of the program, and we also are looking that the math makes sense, right? And as someone shows, like show your match basically as well. The budget form is actually already formulated in such a way that it calculates your 15% and those sorts of things. And so we just want to make sure that people want to elevate that. That is something we have to see as part of the application. And then please read your budget instructions carefully. What is our timeline here? As again, we've touched a little bit, we're doing this webinar today. Application has been out since December 1st, as Julia stated earlier. It closes on January 6, 2023 at 12 noon Central Standard Time, not 12:01, not 12:02, not 12:03. The system cuts you off. We have no control over that, and we have no ability to take applications that are not submitted through the system. So Julia's going to talk a lot about that, but I just want to stress we get these last minute calls of desperation. I'm going to say what I always say: start early, save often. We know it's a hard time of the year to be responding to this RFP. I just want to acknowledge that. But I just want to stress to people that that this timeline is there's no negotiation around it, and so I just want people to plan accordingly.
Lisa,
do we want to speak in? Is there anything in the chat box that I need to respond to now?
we have gotten a few questions. So, is there any opportunity for prepayment of some of the costs in the beginning? So I think that's a question about advances.
I don't know if we have an advance statement actually in this RFP.
Currently all of our ARP funded RFPs have an advance statement in them. However, if there is no ARP money associated with this RFP, we probably are not doing advances. Going down, is this a reimbursement grant? Yes. Ms. Brownlee has a lot of really great questions here. So is this a reimbursement? All City of Chicago RFPs or contracts for DFSS are done on a reimbursement basis. So you are expected to be able to have money in holding or be able to float float and then voucher for reimbursement on the expenses that you use to pay the vendor or pay your services. So another question here: when do you want the agency to roll out the program?
So our expectation is that people will get awarded. We will do city span training, and hopefully we will have staff on board. And our goal is by April or May that we should start seeing people in place. So it isn't, once again, this is why we're asking about the hiring practices and being able to onboard staff, because this is a very quick turnaround time. And then I am looked in the RFP, and yes, this is an ARP, which is American Rescue Plan Act funds, which come with very high reporting requirements. This is a federal money from related to COVID-19 recovery, and it does state, to Julia's point, that there is a statement in there about advances. I will be 100% honest to say that that is something you would have to work directly with finance to figure out, but I'm not sure that you can use finances, do an advance at the beginning to launch your program. So that I will find out.
The advanced policy, as I recall, as it currently stands, is that you would be able, depending on your program budget, et cetera, you would be potentially eligible for up to 25% of your total program costs. So now just remember though, if this is an advance, it doesn't mean that you're going to get this, that you get extra money. It's only that you just get your money before you start, expending, as opposed to sort of after you start expending. So there are so there's no there's no extra money for startup. There's only money that you would just get upfront as opposed to being reimbursed. So here though, we have a number of questions around the budget. So it's, do you have to pay fringe if you will onboard team members as 1099s, which are contractors? If you can only pay 15% as admin, that's only around $37,000. So I believe, Lisa, chime in, but if it's a 1099, you're hiring your team members as 1099s, then you're not really obliged to pay them fringes, and they would actually not be included on the personnel page of the budget. They would be included as a non-personnel cost. And then as Lisa indicated, our fringes the fringe amount, I believe, is automatically built into the budget page. And so regardless of what you can or cannot pay, will be, there's a percentage that the city has sort of decided is the fringe amount, which I think is like 22%, that would automatically be calculated. Lisa, do you have?
And I want to say something. As part of the city's plan around equity and pay equity, I would people should really think about, this is a very intense program with young adults and families. And we also want to ensure that staff is being paid appropriately, a living wage, because that is the city standard. And so if people are opting to go with team members that do not have either benefits or bringing them on, I think you will need to be able to explain why that's not an option and how to ensure that services are going to be executed. That as part of, once again, as part of our equity position with the city, that is something that we are very mindful of. We get asked a lot of questions from city council about equal pay, about pay equity, about living wages. And so I just want to say that is your choice, but then just make sure that you have to be able to justify why the individuals are not going to be staff. We're not saying, like, for those of you who may have other contracts with us, we're not saying they have to be 100% tied to this program. This is not like SCAN where we require you to have everybody be full-time on here. I think the program manager definitely is something you should think about. But I want to be mindful that that the city does, that is something the city is very honed in on, is making sure that as we give dollars to providers in the community, that they are paying people a living wage, and that they're around those things. So I just want to elevate that as well, and just, if that is the route you're going, just to be able to justify then how you supervise somebody, and then also how do you ensure execution and quality for family engagement.
Next question is, can you grant subawards? You as the agency can grant subawards. You can subcontract out whatever you would like. The city, as the provider, or the payer, we actually cannot grant subawards and make you work with them. So, like, we couldn't be like, hey, we know this person that does this, you have to work with them and use the money that we gave you to pay that. But you can subcontract all you want. If someone has a great program but may need to tweak their budget, are you willing to award with contingencies once they modify, they are approved to move forward?
So I can speak to this. So for your proposal, we are asking you to put together a budget for this proposal. If this is not the proposal, and people always get confused when they apply for an RFP with the city, if you are awarded a contract, it doesn't necessarily mean we're awarding you as is the budget you submitted, and we may come back and say, okay, you are an awardee, but here are the things you need you to tweak on your program side. We will ask you to submit a budget. If you are chosen as an awarded entity, we'll ask you to submit a budget. But what we assume is the budget you present is the budget you can execute. And that is how we score accordingly. So definitely read the budget requirements. But the idea is you are presenting a budget and a program that you can execute upon from the beginning. So I just want to be mindful about that. The budget issue, we do always, once you make that determination and we know who is a delegate agency, we ask you to resubmit a budget. At that point, but we are assuming that you are saying you can execute on those certain things. And I'm not sure where contingencies are. So also, I just want to say people could ask questions post this just by emailing us directly. We have contact information to talk about particular circumstances. But the idea is that you are submitting a proposal and a budget that you know you can execute on.
So we are here's somebody writing in specifically saying, we have experience providing restorative justice and trauma-informed healing-centered care to youth. However, we have not previously worked with CPD. Do service providers need to have relationships already in place with CPD, or would DFSS assist in creating linkages?
You do not need to have a relationship already with CPD. We have to know that you have some understanding of law enforcement. And if not, and how you're going to maintain that. Ultimately, yes, DFSS is going to be the person who coordinates those efforts. But we have to know that people have some understanding of law enforcement or working with CPD, or at least some of the challenges as it relates to law enforcement interaction with young people. And so it is not a requirement because you're applying for the area that you're applying for, but you have to be able to demonstrate that you have some understanding of Chicago Police Department and the challenges as it relates to interaction with young people in the field.
Could you confirm the comment regarding showing a match of funds?
I have to remember what I should. So per your budget instructions, and once again, I strongly encourage you to read the entire budget, the entire RFP. In the budget section, you are required to do, let me go back to the actual slide here. Thank you, Julia. There's a admin cap, and then there's an indirect cost that you also have to be able to speak to as well. So within your budget, just making sure that you're accounting for that. So there's an administrative cap piece. So we allow you some administrative coverage that as part of your grant budget. So that will fall for you. And then there's also an indirect rate as well. And that's, once again, that's all in the budget section. But those things are, I just want to flag those because not every one of our contracts are the same, but that the 15% admin cost and then the indirect rate are things you must be able to respond to.
If you are an organization that has a negotiated indirect rate, either because you, most often it's because you're a university, and usually sometimes there's a federal letter. So if you have that negotiated indirect rate and you guys know who you are, you will need to upload that as part of your application so that we have proof that that you can take the indirect.
Correct. And so a lot of times if you have like to Julia's point, if you're running a federal contract generally, or you're doing some other contractual work and you have that federal indirect rate or indirect cost rate, we have a standard amount that's set by the comptroller, and that's on your budget form. If it's anything else, it's higher than that. You have to put that in there, and to Julia's point, you must attach the letter.
Do you prefer short and concise responses to the narrative sections of the application? Oh, Mr. Martinez, how many wisecracker answers I can come up for that? We would love for you. I'll get into this in the next section. All of our text answers, our narrative answers are limited to 4,000 characters, including spaces and punctuation. So you can't really go super long on this. I would love for some creative writing major to in fact fill out a grant application for our reading pleasure and say, a certain literary style. But I think ultimately, I don't know, Lisa, what do you say?
Here's what I'll say, and this is why I think it's helpful that you read the RFP first before you get into the application question. We need you to answer the question. And there's two things I'll say for this. It needs to be clear enough that I get a sense of that you know what you're talking about and that you can execute on that. But also I need to understand who you are. So for example, a lot of times people write their applications or RFP, they have a current contract with us. They think whoever's reading this is going to know them. Do not write assuming that because you have a contract here at DFSS, people just assume, well, they know that I do this. They know that I do that. The person reading your RFP may not be not know anything about you. And so that's the way you should think about it. So definitely when there's areas for you to really get into depth about like what your agency did as a whole and why you're in this community and what you do that there. And then in the places where you have to be very descriptive about things, make sure you are answering directly the question. And so it's hard, and people who are grant writers on here, please cover your ears when I say this, is we don't need the fluff. We need to know exactly what you plan to do, because to Julia's point, there is a limited word count. And so sometimes people get into describing all those things, that's great, but then they never actually answered the question that was part of the application. So in the areas where you can really just talk in general about your agency, use that space there to do that. But when it comes to very specific questions about how is this going to look, what is your retention plan, what is that, answer that question and use that space to really answer the question there, if that makes sense.
The prize.
Yeah, I am the prize. Answer the question, and the RFP is your guide to the application question.
So you're stealing my material here, Lisa. Can you explain the vignette activity in iSupplier? So I can explain the vignette activity. The vignette is uploaded as an attachment to the RFP. So when you go into the application, before you start the quote, if you scroll down to the bottom of iSupplier, there's a whole bunch of attachments that has your RFP document, the budget documents, the conflict of interest form, and so there's a vignette there, and you're going to open it up and you're going to look at the vignette and you're going to answer it. And you're going to then save it as a PDF and you're going to upload it when you start your application or start a quote. You're not going to, I think in the actual application question, it's a yes/no question. It's sort of like, hey, here's a vignette, we want you to fill it out. And then you have to say like, yeah, I remembered to upload it, and you click yes. And so that's how, if that was your question, Mr. Hardman, about the vignette, specifically like how to fill it out physically, that's the answer. But if you had a different question, if I misinterpreted, please just let us know and we can talk more about the vignette itself. Oh, apparently I answered it. So then here we go. Does the agency have to reside in the city of Chicago, as we are located in the western suburbs? So you have to provide services in the city of Chicago, but in terms of residing,
I would just say I'm going to refer to the section in the RFP under program. It's not under program requirements, but it's under current state and prior improvements. One of the things that we're focused on is that the young people are getting services that are hyper local by individuals who have an understanding of the community area that they're covering, and that they can make connections very quickly with service providers in that area. So we don't have you have to be able to then explain if you are not within that area and have an office in that area or within that zone, or for this area, police area, sorry, too many RFPs happening, too many different things. This police area that you're applying for, you have to be able to demonstrate why you chose that police area and what makes you the best person for that police area because of those service connections and or your ability to understand the dynamic, understand the population that's there, and being able to make those connections. So that's, you would have to be able to stress that very clearly as to on those points. And I would reference back to, like I said, that section on current state and improvements. under best practice, a lot of it is about making sure that people are getting services in the community by people who are in the community.
So it looks like we've come to the end of our questions for now. As I said previously, you will have, I'm going to go through now some of the technical aspects of how to make an actual physical application so that we can read, review, and hopefully award you a contract. But so now, you will have the opportunity to ask questions after I go through this about how to manage physically making an application. And I look for, so there'll be further opportunities, but let's get started on this next thing so that we can all move on. So my application tips, if you've never done business with the City of Chicago, please, please, please register into iSupplier e-procurement right now. Don't leave the webinar. Just do it while you're listening. It's going to take a few days to get you into the iSupplier system. What you do is you go to the City of Chicago website and you hit e-procurement. You'll see iSupplier. You'll see a registration aspect for iSupplier, and you have to fill out like a sort of a short questionnaire and upload a few things like your PIN number, your ability to do business in the city, those kinds of things. And then after a few days, your application will be approved and you'll be sent an email, a link to activate your iSupplier account. iSupplier is the vendor end of the City of Chicago's procurement system, the e-procurement system. E-procurement is what you enter into, just as a technicality, what you enter into to make an application. So you use your iSupplier account, which is the vendor account, which you control. We have very little ability to access, you have no ability to access your iSupplier account. It's yours. This means that you will have to delegate designate a captain or somebody who's like the overall master account. We can't get into that master account. So just make sure that whoever you pick is somebody who's going to have some longevity or is a really organized person within the department, because we spend a lot of time helping people get into their iSupplier accounts after that master account holder has left and taken the password with them. That being said, so get into iSupplier. Make sure the master account holder is somebody who, think about it, think it through. Don't just do it willy-nilly. And then get into e-procurement and start your application. So as Lisa had said, she wants, we really encourage that the RFP narrative and, to review your RFP narratives and the applications questions closely. It all ties together. If you have questions about sort of the direction you should go in for a particular aspect of the program, when you refer to those narratives, chances are you're going to get the direction there. I know that they're dense documents and that you probably read something more exciting, although probably not more meaningful. But that that the answers are in there. And remember that everything aligns. So from the narratives, we develop our application questions. And from the narratives and the application questions, we really triangulate that with our selection criteria. And from all three, we're going to pull from that to develop our evaluation criteria. And so the RFP document is really kind of a go-to place for you to think about or suss out really what we are looking for. You can also always call Lisa. You can call me about e-procurement stuff, but don't call me about program stuff, because I will tell you to call Lisa, or my only other option on that is to make it up, and I'm not going to do that because that wouldn't be fair. You want to carefully review your selection criteria. I can't tell you the number of times where people have, I know that everybody does a little bit of stock answers and cutting and pasting, but just don't try to jam your stock answer into a question that might be worded rather specifically. Don't look for those key, read the whole question. Because a lot of times, we'll ask, which way is up? And the answer will be like blue, or, up is a direction. It really doesn't take into account what we were asking, and it was stock answering, it was a stock answer. Now, there's probably places where you can definitely, start with your stock answer and tweak it, or you can, but just make sure there's not a one-to-one. I see that. I know the temptation because I've sat on the grant writing side of the desk, but do try to read through the questions quickly, which kind of comes to the bottom point, which is like start early. These are complicated programs, and we ask complicated questions. Give yourself the time to review. This is not something that is this is not my base nature either, but trust me, you'll do a much better application even if you do nothing but just sort of glance over these questions and sort of put them in the back of your head, read them before, the nth hour when you start putting when you start actually putting your proposal together. As I mentioned before, there's a 4,000 character limit, which includes punctuation and spaces in each response, not the entire packet. Each individual question or quote value, as they're referred to in the e-procurement environment, is allotted 4,000 characters. That's about 2/3 of a single space page using 12.5. Don't use, when you are in the e-procurement environment, don't use the back button on your browser, because that will basically, it will make e-procurement stop saving your work. And then it will eventually kick you out with an error message. And when you go back in, nothing will be there that you were working on. It's a real bummer. So don't do that. But yeah, and so again, start early, save often. Really, I tell people to work offline on this on all RFPs, because once you submit, you won't really have access to your application questions in anything beyond a PDF format. So you really want to work offline. The system doesn't do the 4,000 character counts, although somebody just said it might have for them. So maybe there might have been an upgrade, but make sure you save your good language and save a copy in a Word document that you can actually use, as opposed to sort of a PDF, which is less manipulatable. And if you are doing multiple applications, which I don't believe, are we doing multiple? Can you do you can apply for multiple, do multiple applications in this RFP, Lisa?
Yeah.
You can.
I knew there was one thing I was not sure that I could respond to, but we will confirm by the end of this.
We will confirm that. But if you're applying for more than one police area and you have to do a multiple application, just understand that you need to use a separate email address within your iSupplier account for submitting each proposal. So now you can just set up a dummy account. It can go to the same email address, weirdly enough, but it has to have a different username. So set one up for Ernie and one for Bert, and make your two applications that way. If you try to use one email address, what happens is that it will just keep overwriting whatever you submitted with the next one, and it's a real terrible way to spend your time. And we run into this pretty much almost every RFP that we do. This is a glitch in not a glitch, but this is a thing in the e-procurement system that no one is particularly happy about here. But this is how we're doing it, and so you just need to have a separate. Account. Now you can submit your application and later amend it until the due date, which is January 6th, 2023 at 12 noon, but you can't amend it after that due date. And once the system closes out, you can't make an application, and we don't submit late ones. I tell people to avoid the rush and possible mishaps by submitting early. Plan on the submission taking 30 to 60 minutes. Understand that late applications will not be accepted, and also understand that while there are, and I'll get to this in the next slide, opportunities for technical assistance and hand-holding, and we are happy to do that for you, don't do it 30 to 60 minutes before this application is due, because then there's a line, and so you might not get the help that you need when you need it. I tell people to usually try to shoot to get this in a day before. I was just talking to somebody with another, on a different RFP, and she called me. She was new, or she still is new, a new submitter. She called me yesterday and was like, I'm ready to start submitting stuff and uploading. And so we got her started. And she's like, oh, I'll be done in a couple of hours. Except she's like, and then she's like, but I bet you I won't. And then today, finally, she called and was able to submit. And that is actually the kind of experience you want to have. So for her, a new person in a new system, she gave herself a day. Actually, is turning her proposal in way early, which is even nicer. She gave herself a day, and it took a day. And that was she was able to have thoughtful questions. She was able to not be completely flustered and upset. And and she got her application in, and it looks great, So strive to do things early, really. Of all the things in the world to get exercised and upset about, turning in an application for an e-procurement is not how anybody should be spending their life force or their calories in unnecessary. We do have an e-procurement hotline. That's 312-744-4357 or 744-HELP. That hotline operates only during business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. You can call me, and I am happy to walk you through the most basic e-procurement things. I don't have a very high level of access, but in the end of it all, most of the time I can help you out, and I have a million handouts I can email to you, most of which are usually on the e-procurement website under iSupplier training. I don't know. How did this get in here? Here we go. In this training materials over here, we're going to do, so that's ISUP. So you can go there, look under delegate agency contractors, or just really shoot me an email or call me, and I'm happy to send you this stuff or walk you through whatever it is that you need to be walked through. Just please, 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 just do it early. I know that we're doing this over the holiday season, but I'll be around. So, that dead week between Christmas and New Year's, just give me a call, and we can work out all of your e-procurement questions and then some. So, going into that, I'm going to now talk about two standard application or processes that you have to do as part of the application experience here. One is how to accept an amendment, and then we're going to move on to how to submit the application itself. So we do an amendment, and we'll do one for this to alert our applicant pool that's been to changes in the application or changes in the RFP scope. But we also do it to just provide additional information. So in this case, all of your questions are going to be put into an amendment document. If we have to do any changes or corrections, we'll do it there. And then that amendment is posted as part of the application packet. Once the amendment is posted, you have to accept it. And by accepting the amendment, what we really mean is we want you to understand that you're going to be held liable for the information in the amendment, that you assume, you acknowledge that you understand the application, the materials in the amendment, and you accept it, and that by accepting it, you can then go forward and do your application. But you need to acknowledge that you have read the amendment and that you understand that you are now being held responsible for the information contained by the amendment. Occasionally, for instance, if we have to do an amendment if we're going to change the due date. So so everything, lots of things, both important and perhaps more informational, are captured by the amendment process. And so that's why you will see it's a fairly lengthy one. So in this case, this is how, you're going to start. If you are starting an application, you're going to go to the action bar, you're going to hit create quote, and then you're going to go, and then you're going to have this thing that says it's been amended, your RFP is the RFP has been amended, and you're going to have to, when you go forward, let's go and accept this thing. So you're going to click on this view amendment history, and that will take you to this next screen. And so this is going to be the beginning of your acceptance and acknowledging process. So if you want to see the RFP in view only, you're going to click on 1. To review the amended changes, you're going to click on 2. That will take you, I believe, to the amendment document itself. And then here in the middle, you can see there's like a little one-pager summary that says what we're doing in here. And then after you have done all of these things, you're going to acknowledge the amendment by clicking the button on the upper or lower right-hand side and acknowledge the amendment. And that will then take you to this screen where you're going to accept the terms and conditions. So you're going to check this little tiny box and you're going to acknowledge the changes. And then again, on the right-hand side, you're going to hit acknowledge, which will then take you to this screen, which confirms your acknowledgement of the amendment. You're going to hit yes. I have no idea why you hit no. If you hit no, it will just take you back to the beginning. And then you'll have to acknowledge and confirm and everything all over again. When you hit yes, it will then, you have to do one final acceptance of the terms and conditions. So you'll check this tiny box again, and then you're going to hit accept on the upper or lower right-hand side, and then you will have accepted the amendment, and your life will be significantly better, or at least different, right? So that's how you're going to submit the amendment. You're going to see here, there's literally 5 different screens you have to go through to get there. It really doesn't take much longer than it did for me to just explain it to you. So now we're going to talk about how to submit an application. And this is a good point for you to sort of see how to do what you're up against or what you're going to have to do. Just so you know, most everybody's gets error messages. And so here, when you're going to ready to submit, you're going to save your draft one last time, because save often, submit early, right? And when you're then you're going to click continue. And when you click continue, the e-procurement system kind of does a scan of your whole application, and it sort of goes for low-hanging fruit things that it might think that you've forgotten or that you were wrong. I'm going to go through the 2 most common error messages that people get. This first one is the RFP control requires you to quote on all lines. You'll see here right below that error message, you're going to see that little tab that says lines. And in this case, it's going to say that the lines, lines, when you click on the lines tab, have not been filled out. Lines are something that we don't use in our procurement. We use the budget application. So you can, but it's something that ultimately comes into play when a contract is being awarded, is that line. So we just ask that you go and you put in placeholder numbers. I have been encouraging people for years to give me their winning lotto numbers, but so far nobody has taken me up on that offer. But you can put in numbers from your budget if you want, or put in any number at all. We don't care. We're not going to look at it unless it's a lotto number, and we're gonna really make our decisions about the financial aspect of your application by looking at that uploaded budget sheet. So don't worry about this, but it will get rid of the error message, which is nice. The second error message that people get a lot is this quote value is required for requirement first name. So in the e-procurement environment, requirements refer to your narrative application questions and some of your checklist questions, and quote value is merely the word for answer, or narrative answer. In this case, each question has a name, and so this one is first name, and it will say, so this just merely is saying that you forgot to fill out this particular text box. You didn't put in your first name. And so that is what, so you just go and put in your first name, and then that error message, and we submit, that error message will go away. So after you've gotten rid of all of your error messages, you're ready to proceed and submit. And at this point, when you save and then hit continue, your application will be put into this review and submit phase. And at this point, you can scroll all the way down, and see your responses. And at the very bottom, you're going to do an electronic signature, and you're going to fill in your name and your title, and then you're going to check this box. You're not going to check the box, even though it's the first thing. You check the box after you put in your name and your title, or you'll get an error message telling you that you need to do that. And then you're going to go over to the right, the lower right-hand side of the screen, and here's the submit button. And at the submit button, you'll click it, and you will get this confirmation page. And congratulations, you have submitted your application. So the e-procurement system will send a confirmation email within 24 hours of your submission. A lot of stuff from e-procurement ends up in people's spam, so watch for that. You can also just call or email me, and I will look in e-procurement. The minute you hit submit, I can see that it has been submitted. And so I can see it, and I'm more than happy to provide you with email or verbal confirmation of the fact that you have submitted, and if that takes any stress off of you. That's all I have to say about e-procurement. These, you now can open it up if anybody has any additional questions about this RFP, either the scope, the program aspect, or about the e-procurement aspect. Let me just go to this next slide here. This is, if you need to get a hold of either Lisa or myself after the fact, here's our contact information. And other than that, I wish you all like a really great Friday, a great holiday season, however that takes shape for you. And thank you so much in advance for considering applying for this program. The services that you would be helping to provide are critical to youth, and we're always so happy and thrilled that people want to partner with us. Lisa or Alexandria or Jackie, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do actually. It's myself, and the email responses will come back for myself or Jackie Pickens, just to give people a heads up who will be in charge of this program. And then the question earlier about application guidance is on page 19, page F. There was a question about being not in the applying for an area that you're currently not located in, and about the number of applications. I just want to make sure I respond to that while we're still here. So in that section, it does state as part of that, we encourage people to highlight their place-based expertise, community involvement, and capacity as community leaders in organizing in the community areas that you've chosen. Under that same section, we also state that respondents must submit one application for each police area for which you wish to apply. So you can apply for multiple. I would strongly bet, to Julia's point, if you do that, you have to have an application for every police area, and every attachment has to be on there. So you can't just attach to one and then expect the reader to reference the other application. It will count against you in that sense. So you have to do everything that's required for one application. You have to duplicate that for every area that you apply. So I just want to be clear about that. And that is
additional questions.
Any additional questions in the chat box? I need to respond. I'm trying to verbally and then try to type in the responses. So some of you should also look through the question box for those. But this is your time. If you have other things, if you have something particular that you need to ask, by all means, feel free to reach out by email, and we can respond to that. And as Julia said, all of the questions people have, as well as here, as well as those that come by email, end up in an amendment that gets posted. One thing I will strongly suggest: this is a process. We didn't ask for MOUs. We didn't ask for any letters of support. They're not necessary for anything other than services. So if you have those letters, or someone who's saying, "Yeah, I'd love to provide this service for you," that's great. I strongly please. We are a government entity. This is federal money attached to this. Please do not attach any political letters of support to your application. I just want to say that clearly, because all of this will be audited by the federal government. This is Fed dollars. And I know people may want to show that there's support, but it just, I don't want any of us to be put in a position where we have to defend that. So it's in best light. Please don't attach any political letters of support to your application.
One final question, it looks like, is will the webinar be available after it ends? And yes, I said this in the beginning of the webinar. We will be posting this to the DFSS YouTube website, and then a link from that to that will be posted under the funding opportunity and alerts sections associated with this RFP on the DFSS City website. So sometimes it takes a minute to get it onto the DFSS City website. But it will be uploaded into the DFSS YouTube website probably by the end of Monday, the very latest. And so if you are impatient, just go there if you have a minute or you forget, it will always, you can get the link at the DFSS website itself under funding opportunities or alerts. However, if I don't know, there's like sort of final call for questions. If not, if there are no more questions, I want to thank you all so much for attending and for considering making this application. You know, call if you have a question or email, and definitely, as Lisa and I like to champion, to save often, submit early, and we can't wait to read your applications. So, if there's no further comments or questions, then we will stop recording and have a wonderful rest of your Friday.